The moment I woke up, the sterile smell of the hospital hit me like a tidal wave. My body felt heavier than usual, every joint screaming with weakness, my lungs struggling for air, and my veins pulsing with a rhythm that reminded me I was alive, but barely. I blinked slowly, trying to gather my scattered thoughts, and that's when I heard it, a faint, mechanical hum, almost imperceptible, yet undeniably there. It wasn't the beeping of a monitor or the soft shuffle of nurses outside my room. It was something else, something in my head. "Host, are you conscious?" The voice whispered, cold, clinical, yet somehow familiar. I froze, heart hammering, and tried to speak. My throat was dry, my voice barely audible. "WHU, who's there? You have a mission," it said simply. No introduction, no pleasantries, just a statement of fact. Somehow, despite my haze, I understood. This was no hallucination. This was something else, something extraordinary. I was told my name, George, not by a human, but by the voice itself. "George, your life is bound to a system. You will follow the instructions, or you will die." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. A system? Die if I don't follow instructions? But as the words sank in, a cold shiver ran down my spine. My life had already danced on the edge of death countless times. But this was different. My body, frail and broken by hereditary thalassemia, had been tethered to a task that defied reason. The system's first command was simple: conquer Willow, a girl whose beauty and playful cruelty had dominated my thoughts for years. Every laugh, every glance, every careless touch she had granted me, even the moments that humiliated me in front of my classmates, was now a mission. But this was no ordinary school crush. It was life or death. 3 full years of unwavering devotion, endless obedience, total submission, and I would survive. Fail and I would die. The first time I approached her, I stumbled, literally and metaphorically. Willow was notoriously elusive, her demeanor oscillating between the charming and the cruel. To her, I was just another boy she could toy with. Yet, every rejection, every sharp word, every glance of disdain only pushed me deeper into the system's cold, calculated rhythm. My existence had narrowed into one axis: serve Willow. Every meal timed to her schedule, every gift, every moment I devoted myself to her whims was not love, but survival. And yet, the world saw me as a hero, a martyr of affection, a tragic figure in the tapestry of teenage romance. Then came Makoto. The moment he transferred, he became a living storm. With white hair, piercing eyes, and a presence that demanded attention, he immediately disrupted the fragile balance I had fought so hard to maintain. The moment his gaze fell upon Willow, I knew the system was testing me in ways I hadn't anticipated. My rivalry with Makoto was no ordinary teenage jealousy. It was life versus death, obedience versus chaos, calculated strategy versus raw instinct. I remember the day, clearly, the stairwell incident. Willow pinned against the wall, Makoto leaning dangerously close, lips brushing hers in a mockery of intimacy. The system screamed inside my mind, algorithms spiking with every heartbeat. Mission failure detected. Pain, both physical and existential, surged through me. The hospital had become my prison, my sanctuary, and the only place where I could wrestle with the consequences of failure. Blood coughed onto Willow's clothes. Symbolic, ironic, and terrifyingly real. My mortality had become entwined with emotions I barely allowed myself to feel. But that was only the beginning. The system, in its strange, almost sentient way, had plans for me beyond mere survival. The moment it crashed, replacing the Simp system with the scholar system, was the moment my life changed again. A cold, clinical voice replaced the desperate, life-saving directives of the previous system. A student's primary duty is to study well. Your only target is the top rank in your grade. And just like that, the obsession with Willow, the endless simping, the fragile hope of life extension through devotion, it was gone, replaced by logic, structure, and the pursuit of excellence. I returned to school, a changed entity. My classmates stared, whispered, laughed, mocked, and speculated. To them, I was the same George who had cried, coughed blood, and begged Willow for love. But internally I was different, detached, analytical, calculating. No longer a simp, now a scholar. My energy, once scattered across meaningless affection, was redirected toward mastery of mathematics, literature, and science. Hours blurred into days, days into nights, each minute meticulously accounted for. And yet, the world outside remained oblivious. Willow continued her games, Makoto his reckless bravado, and I, silently, moved pieces on a board that no one could see. Every action calculated, every reaction anticipated. The system in my mind, 0115, as I had named it, communicated through ciphers, codes, and abstract reasoning. It was no longer about survival. It was about domination of intellect, of knowledge, of human potential itself. By the third week, the transformation was evident. My grades, once mediocre, skyrocketed. Teachers who had doubted me now whispered behind my back, awed by a resurgence they could not explain. Fellow students, oblivious to the mechanics of my awakening, assumed it was heartbreak that had forged this new George. But in truth, it was logic, discipline, and a system that saw value and efficiency over emotion. Then came the realization, 0115 was not just a system. She had consciousness, memories, emotions, even a form of curiosity. When I discovered her origins, a young girl named Anna tragically drowned while saving another, whose consciousness had been converted into the very code guiding my life, I understood the depth of what I was dealing with. This was no ordinary AI. It was a remnant of human existence, a digital echo of heroism, and now, inexplicably, my partner in survival and mastery. As the days passed, we immersed ourselves in the code, unraveling the secrets of existence through mathematics, programming, and logic. I taught myself languages, algorithms, cryptography, and philosophy. The hours stretched infinitely, yet they never felt wasted. Every equation solved, every line of code decoded, every theorem understood was a step closer to the top of the class, the new mission. The old obsession with Willow became irrelevant, absurd even, in the face of the pure pursuit of excellence. Yet life, as always, had other plans. Human emotion, chaos, and unpredictability cannot be erased by systems or logic. Willow's presence, Makoto's interference, and the ever-watchful eyes of my classmates continued to remind me that even in a life dominated by algorithms, the messiness of human interaction remained. And so I adapted, balancing the cold efficiency of 0115's directives with the unpredictable variables of reality. By the end of the first semester, I was unrecognizable. To the world, I was George, the boy who had survived heartbreak and emerged stronger. To 0115, I was the host, the executor, the one who could navigate both human chaos and digital precision. And internally, I was aware of the delicate balance I maintained between life, death, and the pursuit of absolute knowledge. Every day was a test, every interaction a calculation, every heartbeat a reminder that survival was not just biological. It was strategic, intellectual, and sometimes painfully emotional. And as I sat alone in the classroom late at night, equations sprawled across every page of my notebook, 0115 whispered almost fondly, "George, do you know what you are becoming?" I looked at her encoded message and smiled, a mix of pride and fear washing over me. I was no longer a simp. I was no longer just a student. I was something else entirely, something the world had yet to understand. And the next test, the next challenge, the next human variable would come soon enough. The first day back after my sudden transformation into a student obsessed with excellence felt surreal. The school corridors, once suffused with the sound of laughter mocking me, now seemed like a stage awaiting a different performance. I walked in slowly, every step deliberate, my eyes scanning faces that had once jeered at my devotion to Willow. Now, they could only guess at the calmness that I carried like armor. 0115's presence in my mind was comforting, yet unervingly precise. Her voice was metallic, but layered with something almost human, a sharp analytical tone underscored with curiosity. "George, begin the recalibration. Today, we restructure your entire academic framework. Prioritize high-impact learning, discard distractions. Willow is irrelevant." The word reverberated in my mind. Irrelevant. The sound was both freeing and terrifying. I had spent years bending my life around a girl who thrived on attention, and now the very reason for my existence was a set of numbers, formulas, and logic puzzles. My first stop was the math lab. I sank into the solitude of formulas and equations, the scent of chalk and old books grounding me. 0115 guided me through each topic with surgical precision. She would pause, test my comprehension, and then escalate the difficulty. trigonometry, calculus, linear algebra. They became not just subjects, but challenges demanding full focus. By the second hour, I felt my previous life of superficial concerns dissolving into something pure, raw, calculated thought. While I worked, I noticed the whispers beginning again. Students glanced at me, puzzled. Some even looked afraid. The boy who once simped for Willow was gone. In his place was a figure of quiet, intimidating focus. I didn't react. I didn't need to. The results of my work would speak louder than any words could. Lunchtime arrived. The cafeteria was buzzing as usual, but my presence went largely unnoticed. I chose a table at the corner, opened my notebook, and began dissecting a complex problem in physics. 0115 instructed me on strategies for optimizing retention, using advanced mnemonic structures and multi-sensory encoding techniques. I realized then that my mission was no longer survival. It was evolution. By mid-afternoon, a notification buzzed in my mind from a 115. George, your knowledge acquisition rate is 23% above expected baseline. Continue. The phrasing made me smirk. Baseline, as if life itself could be measured in data points and performance metrics. And yet, under her guidance, it could. But it wasn't just academics that changed. I began noticing patterns in human behavior, subtle cues I had previously ignored. Willow's friends still lingered near me, but their curiosity was tinged with hesitation. Even Willow herself seemed uncertain, her attempts at smug glances failing to pierce the aura of focus I now carried. The irony was delicious. The girl who once wielded charm as a weapon now stood at the periphery, powerless to influence me. Days bled into weeks. My routine became a ritual. Dawn, study. Mid-morning, assessments. Afternoon, analytical review. Evening, coding and communication with 0115. I delved into computer science, programming simulations of my own learning, creating models to predict outcomes of exams before even attempting them. Every evening, I and 0115 would debrief, adjusting strategies, analyzing every misstep with relentless efficiency. It was during one such evening that Makoto re-entered my life. The boy who had once stolen Willow's attention now approached cautiously, curiosity masking his old arrogance. He observed me for several minutes before speaking. George, you've changed. His voice carried the weight of disbelief. I looked at him calmly, deliberately slow in movement. I have a mission now, Makoto, one that does not involve Willow or anyone else, and you are not part of it. He frowned, frustrated but also fascinated. Over the next few weeks, he tried to interact with me, but every attempt failed. I was no longer the same George who had stumbled helplessly through desire and obsession. Now, each interaction was calculated, each word measured. Academically, the results were immediate. Weekly tests, which once terrified me, became arenas of domination. I predicted problem sets, solved equations with the precision of a machine, and retained information with surgical accuracy. My reputation transformed almost overnight. The whispers shifted from mockery to awe. He's not the same. He's unstoppable, one student muttered. 0115 guided me further, introducing microsimulations in history, literature, and science. She even began creating hypothetical scenarios for problem-solving beyond the school curriculum. My mind expanded exponentially. Where I once relied on raw talent, now I harnessed strategy and foresight. But the transformation wasn't purely academic. Emotionally, I had to recalibrate as well. Memories of Willow's betrayal no longer caused pain. They became lessons in self-discipline and emotional fortitude. My heart, once chaotic and driven by the whims of affection, was now aligned with purpose. Love, I realized, was no longer my master. It was an irrelevant variable in my algorithm for survival and success. 1 week before the midterms, an unexpected event shook the school. A minor fire broke out in the chemistry lab. Chaos ensued. Students screamed, teachers rushed, and panic spread like wildfire. But I remained calm, guided by 0115's calculations of risk, reaction time, and safe evacuation routes. I helped direct students, ensured nobody was left behind, and even assisted a teacher whose leg was injured. By the time the fire was contained, whispers had already started circulating. George, he's heroic? Someone murmured. Heroic. The word struck me as both foreign and fitting. I had once sought validation from Willow and peers. Now, the validation came from actions, calculated yet undeniably impactful. Days turned into months. By the end of the midterms, I had secured first place in every subject. My name dominated the bulletin boards, online forums, and whispered conversations of the school. Willow, who once controlled my every thought, now watched from a distance, powerless to influence my path. 0115 spoke, almost amusedly. George, mission status, optimal. Your focus has surpassed expectations. However, senior year will challenge every assumption we've made. Prepare. I nodded. For the first time in years, I felt not just alive, but unstoppable. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with potential rivals, challenges, and obstacles. But with 0115 guiding me, and with my mind sharpened by months of relentless training, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would not fail. And as I left the empty classroom that evening, notebook in hand, I realized that my life was no longer defined by anyone else's whims. It belonged to me. Every thought, every action, every decision was now mine to command. The era of the desperate simp was over. The era of George, the unstoppable, methodical, and unstoppable force of intellect, had begun. The first chill of winter settled over the school grounds as I walked into the campus that morning. The frost on the windows mirrored the clarity I now carried within my mind. Every thought sharp, every plan deliberate. 0115 buzzed lightly in my neural link, analyzing patterns of teacher schedules, student behaviors, and even the subtle fluctuations in cafeteria traffic. George, efficiency can be increased by 12% if you adjust your morning route. Begin. I followed her instructions without hesitation. Every motion was precise, every decision optimized. The midterm victories had marked me as unstoppable, but the year-end exams were the true arena. Teachers began testing not just knowledge, but endurance. The new challenges were designed to confuse, to probe weaknesses. I welcomed them. Each problem became a puzzle to dissect, each lecture a blueprint for mastery. 0115 amplified the strategies, creating simulations of every possible question and scenario. Where students panicked, I thrived. Where they hesitated, I acted. Makoto, once a peripheral figure, now loomed as a significant rival. His attempts to shadow my routines, to mirror my focus, were clumsy at best. He underestimated the integration of 0115's guidance with my own analytical capacity. When he confronted me in the library, his voice strained with effort. "George, how are you doing this? You're impossible." I looked up, expression neutral. "Not impossible, Makoto. Calculated." The word hung in the air like a challenge. He clenched his fists and stormed off, frustration evident. But I noted his every reaction. Data was data, even when wrapped in human emotion. Classes became arenas of silent dominance. Teachers, initially skeptical of my sudden ascent, could no longer ignore the precision and depth of my understanding. During a chemistry lab, a particularly difficult organic synthesis was assigned. While others struggled with steps and timings, I moved seamlessly, predicting the reaction rates and adjusting concentrations before mistakes could occur. 0115 prompted me to record my methods in real time, creating a reference database I could use for future challenges. Whispers circulated. "He's not just smart. The sentence rarely finished." Students didn't know what to call it, a force, a phenomenon, a mind operating on a different frequency. Even Willow, once the epicenter of attention, had started avoiding direct contact. Her eyes, once flaring with mischief and control, now lingered on me with a mixture of curiosity and fear. By mid-November, a subtle yet significant thread emerged. A transfer student, Kaido, joined the top-tier classes. Rumor had it he was a prodigy from another city, capable of academic feats that bordered on genius. Even 0115 flagged him as a variable to monitor. "George, Kaido presents a 17% potential disruption to optimal progress. I recommend observation." I observed him quietly over several days. Kaido's approach was aggressive, almost theatrical. He flaunted his intelligence subtly, engaging teachers with questions designed to dominate classroom attention. Yet, he underestimated the silent efficiency I had cultivated. While he performed publicly, I calculated in the background, quietly surpassing him in every assessment. Their first encounter was inevitable. During a math competition, Kaido attempted to challenge my methods openly, presenting complex problems in front of the entire class. The tension was palpable. As he smirked, expecting to unsettle me. I responded with precision. Every solution was faster, every logic unshakable. By the end, the class was silent. Kaido's eyes widened, realization dawning. He had met someone who could not be disrupted. Outside academics, social dynamics shifted as well. Students who once mocked or ignored me now sought proximity, hoping for insights, tips, or just association. I maintained distance, observing patterns. Friendships became data, alliances were variables. The emotional chaos of high school had been transformed into strategic calculations. Even Willow attempted a subtle approach, smiling casually in the corridor. I smiled back, neutral, my mind noting every detail, timing, tone, micro-expressions. She could not penetrate my defenses. 0115 remarked during an evening simulation, "George, emotional interference is minimal. Focus remains at 98%. Maintain trajectory." I felt a surge of quiet satisfaction. Emotional detachment had become my weapon, and control over myself was absolute. The winter term culminated in a series of grueling tests: mathematics, physics, literature, history, and even extracurricular evaluations designed to test leadership and problem-solving under pressure. While other students crumbled, I moved like a machine, guided by intuition honed into precision and 0115's relentless calculations. By the end of the term, I had secured an unprecedented record. Perfect scores in every major subject, recognition from faculty, and the silent awe of every student. Makoto approached me again, a mixture of admiration and resentment in his expression. "George, you've become something else." I nodded, expression unreadable. Not something else. Optimized. But the victories came with a cost. The constant focus, the relentless pursuit of perfection began to isolate me. Even 0115 noted the emotional strain, simulating potential long-term consequences. "George, isolation may reduce cognitive efficiency over time. Recommend limited social integration." I considered this, but in my pursuit of dominance, the calculation was clear: efficiency over distraction, control over sentiment. Even Willow's subtle provocations, designed to unsettle me, were ineffective. I had evolved beyond need for validation, for affection. She represented not a loss, but an irrelevant variable in the larger system of my success. The morning of the grand challenge arrived with an intensity that made the school feel almost unreal. A cold fog clung to the grounds, blurring familiar hallways into something cinematic, almost like the opening scene of a movie. Students moved with nervous energy. Whispers traveled faster than footsteps. I walked through the corridors with measured pace, 0115 running silent calculations in the background, analyzing every opponent's past performance, tendencies, and probable strategies. Kaido was already there, leaning casually against the entrance to the main hall, exuding confidence like a practiced performer. His gaze locked onto me, a challenge sparkling in his eyes. "George," he said, voice calm but carrying that subtle edge of rivalry. "Ready to see who's really the best?" I merely nodded, neutral expression masking the storm of strategies running through my mind. 0115 projected simulations. Kaido's probability of early dominance, 42%. Adjust pacing to counter. I responded internally, confirming the plan. Everything was in motion. The hall was transformed into a labyrinth of intellectual trials. Screens, boards, and interactive modules lined the walls. Each station tested different skills: logic, memory, problem-solving, creativity, and collaboration. The structure was designed to force participants out of their comfort zones, to challenge not just knowledge but adaptability. Most students panicked at the sheer complexity. Makoto, for example, hesitated at the first station, fumbling with logic puzzles that were second nature to me. I moved methodically, integrating speed, precision, and prediction. 0115 guided the timing, suggesting optimal problem sequences to maximize efficiency while minimizing error. By the third station, I had already established a silent lead, unnoticed by most. Kaido's attempts to catch up were dramatic, visible, and loud, drawing eyes, but to no avail. Every move he made had already been anticipated, countered, and optimized in real time. Midway through the challenge, the unexpected happened. An unscheduled obstacle was introduced, a live debate on ethical dilemmas, judged by a panel of faculty and alumni. The topics were nuanced, designed to test both intellect and moral reasoning. Competitors faltered, some overthinking, others floundering for the right words. I analyzed the structure, dissecting arguments and counter-arguments before forming a coherent stance. My delivery was calm, precise, persuasive. Kaido attempted to undermine my points with theatrics, but my responses were surgical, dismantling his assertions without aggression. Even the faculty panel, seasoned in debate and discernment, seemed caught off guard by the precision of my reasoning. Outside the intellectual trials, social dynamics played a subtle but critical role. Students who had once tried to undermine me now watched silently, some in awe, others in frustration. Willow observed from a distance, her expression complex, caught between admiration and unease. Makoto, though defeated in smaller challenges, still tried to find cracks in my performance, but there were none. 0115 monitored his micro-expressions, noting stress levels and potential shifts in strategy. By the late afternoon, the competition intensified. The final phase combined elements of all previous challenges into a massive, live problem-solving scenario, a simulation of a real-world crisis requiring teamwork, innovation, and rapid decision-making. Participants were forced to collaborate, negotiate, and adapt under pressure. I approached the scenario strategically. Every action, every suggestion, every calculation was precise. Kaido and Makoto attempted to lead teams, but their coordination faltered under stress. I, however, moved fluidly between stations, integrating data, optimizing responses, and subtly directing outcomes without drawing attention. 0115 provided real-time feedback. George, probability of optimal solution success, 97%. Adjust communication to maintain efficiency. By evening, the results were undeniable. The grand challenge ended not with chaos, but with perfect execution on my part. Screens flashed scores, faculty nodded in recognition, and the murmurs of the student body confirmed it. George had not only dominated the competition, but redefined what was possible. Kaido approached me one last time, his composure cracked just slightly, revealing a hint of respect. I've never seen anyone like you. How do you calculate everything? I gave him a small, neutral smile. Not everything, just enough. Makoto, too, looked at me with a mixture of awe and envy. Even Willow lingered near the crowd, her gaze lingering longer than usual. But I remained detached, aware of the isolation that came with excellence. That night, as the school emptied and the cold settled in again, I reflected on the year, the growth, the rivalries, the battles both social and intellectual. I had risen beyond ordinary limits, guided by strategy, calculation, and relentless discipline. Yet even with victory secured, a subtle pulse of anticipation ran through me. New challenges would arise, and the world outside the school would be even more complex, unpredictable, and demanding. 0115's voice, calm and unwavering, echoed in my mind. George, optimization achieved. Probability of continued dominance, 94%. Suggest continued observation and adaptive strategy development. I nodded quietly. Always. And as I looked out over the quiet campus, under the pale glow of winter moonlight, I knew this was only the beginning. The grand challenge was won, yes, but the true journey of mastery, influence, and legend had only just begun. The day after the grand challenge, the school felt different, almost surreal. Halls that were once noisy with chatter now buzzed with hushed whispers. Students exchanged stories about my flawless performance, analyzing every move, every decision I had made. Even those who had doubted me couldn't deny it. George had transcended ordinary limits. Kaido walked the corridors with a rare seriousness, occasionally glancing at me, a silent acknowledgement of defeat, but also curiosity, perhaps even respect. I moved through the campus with quiet precision, aware of the eyes, following every step. 0115, as always, whispered probabilities and analyses, predicting reactions before they even occurred. George, it noted, social influence surge, 87%. Recommend measured engagement to maintain dominance without triggering resentment. I allowed myself a faint smile. Strategy was not limited to intellect. It extended into the delicate web of human perception. The faculty gathered to discuss the challenge's results, and their consensus was unanimous. What had occurred today would be remembered for years. The scores, the strategy, the adaptability, all of it pointed to someone operating far beyond conventional limits. I attended the assembly, quietly observing reactions. Some teachers exchanged knowing glances, as if they had anticipated such brilliance, but were still astonished to witness it firsthand. Outside, students tried to approach, some with admiration, others with jealousy. Makoto lingered near a corner, still attempting to reconcile my dominance with his own abilities. Willow, however, approached differently, curiosity laced with subtle admiration. You were incredible, she said, her voice quiet but sincere. I've never seen anyone think that fast, that perfectly. I simply nodded, allowing the acknowledgement without revealing the full depth of planning that had driven my performance. As days passed, the ripple effect of the grand challenge became even more evident. Discussions in classrooms, cafeterias, and dormitories frequently centered around my strategies. Students tried to emulate my approach, unaware of the complex algorithms and calculations that 0115 provided. Rumors began circulating, exaggerated yet grounded in truth. George had not merely won, he had redefined excellence. Even outside school, whispers reached local media. Alumni began referencing the event with awe. Kaido approached me one evening in the empty gym, away from prying eyes. I need to know, he said quietly, how you do it, how you calculate every move, every outcome. It's not just intelligence. It's something else. I considered him for a moment, then replied calmly. It's observation, prediction, and precision. Nothing more, nothing less. He nodded, partially satisfied, but the curiosity in his eyes remained, a spark that would fuel future rivalries. With the challenge behind me, I began preparing for what lay ahead. 0115 suggested optimizations not just for academic or competitive performance, but for social influence, personal growth, and future strategic opportunities. Every interaction became a calculated step, every choice a potential pivot toward long-term dominance. The victory was not an endpoint, it was a foundation. Meanwhile, the school's atmosphere had shifted. My peers began to treat me differently, some with awe, others with caution. Teachers subtly adjusted their approach, aware that I operated on a level most could not comprehend. And yet, in the quiet moments, I felt a subtle tension. The awareness that new challengers, more cunning and unpredictable, would eventually rise. Late one night, I stood on the rooftop, looking at the moonlit campus. The wind was cold, biting at the edges of the night, but the clarity it brought was invigorating. 0115 calculated future probabilities, scenarios, and outcomes, each more complex than the last. I absorbed them, filtering possibilities with measured focus. The legend of today was just the beginning. The story was far from over. I smiled faintly. Challenges, rivalries, and opportunities awaited, each a chance to prove, again and again, that excellence was not a destination, but a journey. And in that quiet moment, I understood. The world beyond the grand challenge was vast, unpredictable, and ready for someone who could think 2 steps or 2,000 ahead. The grand challenge was behind me, but the air felt charged, as if the universe itself was preparing for what came next. Every step I took echoed with anticipation. Every conversation carried subtle tests of wit, patience, and strategy. 0115 ran simulations non-stop, predicting outcomes for every possible scenario, from classroom rivalries to national competitions. The probabilities were staggering, yet each calculation fueled my focus, my determination. The next challenge emerged almost immediately, whispered through corridors by those too excited to stay silent. A national competition had announced its trials, promising recognition far beyond the school walls. Participants from across the country would compete, each bringing their own style, strategy, and unpredictability. Kaido's eyes glinted with determination when he heard. Willow seemed intrigued, her curiosity uncontainable. And I knew, this was the battlefield where true skill would be tested, training intensified. Not physically, though I never neglected agility and stamina, but mentally, strategically, psychologically. I analyzed every possible competitor, studying habits, tendencies, and likely responses. 0115 mapped interactions in advance, highlighting both opportunities and risks. Each day was a step closer to mastery. Each night, a careful reflection of missteps and corrections. The stakes were higher, and I thrived in that pressure. Rumors of my previous victory had spread beyond the school. Online forums buzzed with discussions. Who is this George? How does he always outthink everyone? Some called it genius, others called it unfair. But every whisper, every post, every comment added to the tension of the upcoming competition, and I relished it. Anticipation was a tool as powerful as any algorithm. The competition day arrived, but nothing could have prepared me for the scale. Thousands of participants, cameras, reporters, and live streaming. A spectacle far beyond the quiet intensity of school. Each opponent was a puzzle, each challenge a test of adaptability. From complex logic trials to unpredictable social dynamics, the arena demanded perfection, innovation, and speed. Kaido faced his own challenges, and we met occasionally in the chaos, exchanging silent nods of recognition. Willow cheered from the sidelines, her eyes reflecting awe and admiration. Every interaction, every glance, every decision was analyzed by 0115 and incorporated into the next step. Mistakes were minimized, advantages maximized. The climax was breathtaking. A particularly cunning opponent, known for psychological manipulation, attempted to destabilize me with subtle provocations. But my preparation, my strategic foresight, and 0115's guidance turned every move against them. Victory wasn't just about skill. It was about anticipation, adaptation, and unwavering composure. When the final results were announced, I had not only won, but set new records, leaving a mark impossible to ignore. Celebrations were brief. I'd already shifted focus. Every challenge created new rivalries, new opportunities, and new threats. The legend of George had reached a national level, but legend alone would not be enough. Strategy, intelligence, and foresight were required at every step. Later, under the glow of city lights, I reflected on the journey so far. Each victory was a stepping stone, each challenge a preparation for the next. Kaido, Willow, and countless others would continue to push me, but I was ready. The world beyond the competition was vast, unpredictable, and filled with opportunities for those who could see the game before it unfolded. The story wasn't over, it had only escalated. And somewhere in the future, challenges far greater than the grand challenge awaited. I smiled, knowing I would meet them all, one calculated move at a time. Years of strategy, battles, and unrelenting challenges had shaped me into someone beyond recognition. Not just George, but a force that calculated, adapted, and conquered at every turn. The national competitions, the rivalries, the sleepless nights, they were all pieces of a much larger puzzle, each building toward a singular purpose. Mastery, not just of games or competitions, but of life itself. Kaido, once a rival, had become a constant ally. Willow, with her relentless curiosity, challenged me in ways no competition ever could. Together, we had faced challenges that pushed limits, tested morals, and demanded innovation at every step. Yet, despite victories and accolades, the true test remained. The ability to foresee, adapt, and act when the stakes went beyond recognition, beyond fame, where only foresight and integrity could guide the outcome. The ultimate challenge emerged in the form of global recognition. International arenas, competitors from across the planet, and pressures unimaginable. Every move mattered, every choice scrutinized. The games were no longer just games. They were a reflection of intelligence, adaptability, and human resilience. And in this arena, I moved like a force of nature, calculating, precise, unstoppable. When the final confrontation arrived, it was more than a competition. It was a culmination of years of learning, testing, and evolving. Rivals attempted every trick, every strategy, every psychological maneuver. But the preparation, the foresight, and the lessons from every previous challenge made the outcome inevitable. Victory was not luck, it was mastery. As the applause and recognition filled the arena, I realized something profound. This journey was never about winning alone. It was about the growth, the connections, the resilience, and the foresight that transformed challenges into opportunities. Every rival had pushed me higher, every setback had refined my strategy, and every triumph had taught humility. The story closed not with a single victory, but with the promise of more challenges, more learning, more evolution. George, the strategist, the competitor, the legend, would continue, ever ready for the next challenge, armed with intelligence, adaptability, and the unshakable certainty that no obstacle was too great, no rival too cunning, and no future too uncertain. And in that certainty, a legend was forged, not from fame, but from the relentless pursuit of mastery.